Right, so let's start with basic hooping. I've got here a 240 by 150 Husqvarna hoop. This comes as standard with the likes of the J35, the Topaz 25, Topaz 40, and also fits a lot of the bigger machines. It might not come as a standard with one of them, but it's a very useful size hoop. So one of my most used, I have to say. So we're going to have a look at how the instruction manual tells you to hoop. Okay, and then I'm going to show you how I do it, just to be a rebel. So what I've got here is a piece of fabric and some stabilizer underneath, and we're going to show you how this works. Now, we have a quick release mechanism on the bottom there. You've got an inner hoop and an outer hoop, and this is the bit that actually attaches to your machine. So I'm showing it the right way up for you, hopefully, so that you can see what I'm doing. So the fabric and the stabilizer need to be bigger than the hoop, because you've got to be able to trap enough of that in between the inner and the outer hoop to be able to hold it tightly and for it not to slip. So I'm going to put my hoop, I'm going to use my mat to line it up a bit. Actually, it really helps, because once you've got your fabric over the top of it, you can't see it. So just helps keep everything level. Normally I would of course iron this, but for the purposes of this it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to go with it. So you've got your fabric over the top, everything's sort of got a decent margin on it all the way around, and we're going to put the inner hoop in. Now you need to be able to see Husqvarna Viking at the top so you can read it. Okay, there is a top and a bottom to these hoops, and you need to make sure you've got it in the right way round. So I'm going to push it in against the outer hoop, and then I'm going to work my way down until it pops in. Okay, now we've got the quick release at the bottom here. This is really important. You're going to try and do that up. Now that actually wasn't too tight, but if I screw that screw in slightly and now try the same thing again, it doesn't want to go. It's too tight for the clip. Don't force it. If that's how they get broken. If it's too tight, just loosen the screw off slightly and try again until it snaps in quite comfortably. Okay, if you do happen to break these pieces, they are available as spare parts. The screw, the spring, the little nut that sits inside this piece, and this piece itself are all available as spare parts from your dealer, but you'll need to tell them which hoop it's for, because they're not all the same. So anyway, so if we turn that over, hopefully you can see that okay, we've got a nice flat finish. It's not, I wouldn't say it's drum tight, it's flat, but if you come to this corner, there's a little bit of bagginess here, and that's because the corners of the hoop have been pinched together when we've done that clip up. So what I'm going to do now is show you the way I do it to avoid these pinch points in the corners, because this isn't a particularly big hoop, but if we had, say for instance, a 260 by 360 hoop, that pinch point can be quite substantial, and it can make a difference to the tension on your stabilizer. So I'm going to use the quick release, does what it says on the tin. Take that out, take my fabric away, and I'm going to close that up this time. And I think that'll probably be about the right tightness. We might have to slacken it slightly, but okay, so let's just use my lines on my board, put that on there, and we're now going to do the same thing again. So Husqvarna Viking at the top, push the top in against that inner hoop, outer hoop even, and work our way down the edges until it snaps in. Now if it doesn't want to snap in at this point, you can loosen that screw off some more. Okay, and now it's gone. Did you hear that go? So just make sure it's pressed in firmly all the way around. And if I turn it over now, this is much flatter because we've tensioned the stabilizer by pushing it in from above, and there is no pinch point here at all. This is all perfectly flat. So I prefer that method. It puts less strain on that clip, and yeah, you can't force it in if it's not going to go. You're going to have to loosen it off enough to actually get that inner hoop in, so there's less risk of damage to that clip at the bottom there. Now, looking at this, I don't know if you can see, there's a few, it's a little bit loose, the fabric on the top there. Although the underneath is quite nice and tight, the fabric is not. Now, we have to be really careful here, because what we don't want to do is stretch the fabric in the hoop. If you stretch the fabric, people talk about getting it drum tight. There's a bit of a problem with that, because you've stretched it to get it in the hoop, you then embroider on it, and then when you take it out of the hoop, the whole thing just sort of relaxes back to its normal size, and your embroidery puckers. So that doesn't really help you. So we have to try and flatten this out, but we're going to do it very, very carefully. And when we are going to pull this slightly, but I don't want to pull it so as to stretch the fabric. This is only to flatten it out. So if I pull just gently, you can see how gently I'm doing that. There's very little. We don't want to distort the fabric, we don't want to stretch it. That's taking out all the ripples that way. There we go. Now that's lovely and flat, isn't it? But I was very, very gentle with what I did, just to get those last few wrinkles out. You may find that spray starch is very good for your fabric. It'll help keep it flat in the hoop. I would starch it on the back, particularly if you've got a dark colour like this, because obviously white starch on black fabric is not a good look. And you know, if you've got so much excess fabric in here that it's rippling, actually consider whether it's better just rehooping it rather than trying to just adjust it slightly. I'm just going to make sure that screw is done up. Yeah, I'm happy with that. You may also have seen, when you got your machine, you had a little collection of metal clips, and some of you may have thought, what on earth are they for? They're very strange, and put them back in the box again. They're actually to help keep the sides of your hoop together, especially on the big hoops. These long sides, while the fabric can be held very tightly at the corners, it's perhaps not so tight halfway down the sides, because they can, you know, flex a bit more. So the idea of these clips is to hold the inner and the outer hoop together. And you've got, if I hold that up, you've got one side with just a little tab on it, and the other side has got a full width tab on it. And you basically put the small tab in between the two little lugs on the side of the hoop, and there are only certain places you can put them. Just put them around, and it helps keep these two bits clamped together. Now when it comes to this side where you've got the attachment to the machine, if you put these clips on either side, it can actually make it quite difficult to get on the machine. So what I sometimes do is I either cut or just tear the stabilizer here, just so that I've got a flap that I can lift up to get that out the way, to get the hoop on the machine easily. It's up to you how many of these you put on, but I don't see any reason not to use all the points that you've got. So that's my fabric hooped and ready to go in the machine. When you want to take these clips off, they've got these two little ears on the top. You just pinch the ears together and they pull off. Oops. Didn't want to leave me, did it, that one? There we go. These little marks don't appear on every hoop. I've got a 120 square one here, and that doesn't have any. That is just as it comes. It's only really this hoop size upwards that will have these on, and you know, something as small as that wouldn't need them. We'll talk about positioning now. I'm just going to take that out of there, and I'm going to use this 120 by 120 hoop just to show you the templates. Okay, this is just the same as the other one, except a smaller size, and this will fit all the machines. There's any of the machines in the range will take this one. So we do templates for some of these hoops, and they just fit on. I don't know if you've noticed, they've got centre markings on them, and the templates just fit on those centre markings. You can't get it the wrong way up, because somebody amongst you may have noticed that the centre of the hoop isn't actually the physical centre of the hoop. It's usually towards the bottom rather than dead centre. So let's get our, if you can see this. This is probably one of the hoops where I don't use the push it in method. I do use the close the latch method because it's a bit easier. The smaller hoop, it's less easy to. There we go. Right, again, just a little tweak to get that to go in. Get used to how this feels after a little while. Right, okay, so there's our hoop template. Now we can mark the centre of the hoop through all these holes. You've got a centre mark, and you've got, you know, centre of each side and everything else, but we can actually do that before we put it in the hoop to help us with centering as well. So you can use the template to get the centre marks on your fabric first if you wanted to. So let's say we wanted a short pencil here somewhere. There we go. So that's the centre. And that's the way up it is as well. That's helpful, isn't it? So we can actually mark our fabric up ready. Yeah, that's the bottom. Turn it the right way around for you guys. So now, so if I was trying to do this on a garment or something and I needed to be in a particular place, this will help. So I can put my template and my inner hoop on the fabric ready. And what I usually do is I pick up the whole thing and then come to hoop it. How close have I got that? It's not too bad, you know. It's gone a little bit that way, hasn't it? But not much. Okay, let's just pop that slightly again. So you might have to just compensate a little for how you're putting it in the hoop, because it moves it as you put it in. And that's centered up in my hoop. And I can just do the clip up, ready to go into the machine. And again, if you need to do this slight tweaking, you can always put the template back in just to make sure you're not tweaking it in the wrong direction. Okay. Now, as to why we have the centre of the design not in the middle of the hoop, I'm going to show you exactly why that is. Right, so I'm just going to show you how this sits in relation to the foot and the needle on the machine. So I'm going to select a 120 square hoop on my machine. I've just picked a very small design. Right, let's let go. So hopefully you can see that clip there. When you put the hoop on, it pushes in from the front and you'll see this little button move. Do you see that pop in? That's the correct way to put on your hoop. You don't hold that button down while you put the hoop on. If people have difficulty with the machine recognising their hoop, quite often it's because they've held that button down while they've put the hoop on. It's only for releasing it, so quite a useful bit of information there. Okay, so I don't know if you can see where the needle is. Here, I've got a sensor Q foot on, but if I come round the side here, excuse me wobbling the camera about, but I want to show you. Look how much of the foot is in front of the needle. It's very little. But look how much of the mechanism is behind the needle. This is why we have a big gap at the top of the hoop, because you don't want any of this arrangement to actually hit the hoop. It's not about where the needle is, it's about where all this lot is. So if I get my template, wherever it went, obviously don't sew with this in. That would be very, very silly indeed. Okay, right, we've got the template on. So can you see where the last line is, or the outside of the embroidery areas? This section here we can't actually sew in, and it's so this can't actually hit the hoop. So that's why the physical centre of the hoop isn't actually the centre of the embroidery area, and that's really important. Anyway, let's take that out, and I think I got that pretty close in terms of the centre of my hoop, don't you? So that's how templates can help. Right, so I mentioned earlier about floating, and this is quite important actually. It's my preferred method of hooping. I don't usually hoop my fabric in the hoop. Let's put our stabiliser in there. So if I push that towards you, again make sure we've got Husqvarna Viking at the top so we can read it, and hoop up our stabiliser. Okay, nice and flat, make sure that's tight enough. Yeah, all good. Right, I haven't got my fabric in because I'm going to float it. I can just put a square of fabric in the hoop like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the base function on my machine to fasten the fabric to the stabiliser so that it's held flat but not under tension. This is the beauty of this. We can get that perfectly flat. We don't have to do any little tweaky adjustments. We don't risk overstretching it. It's going to be nice and relaxed but held firmly to the stabiliser so the stabiliser can do its job and support the embroidery and prevent the fabric puckering. So I'm now going to take that to the machine and show you how to use the base function. Right, so we're back at the machine. I'm going to put the hoop in. Let's recognise my hoop. Didn't act up. You have to be really careful with the hoop that you've selected the right one on the screen to match the one that you're actually putting on the machine. There are some that are the same size, but one is metal and one is a standard hoop, and it will tell the difference between the two, so you've got to make sure that you selected the right one. I've just got a very tiny design in the centre of this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the base function on my machine. On something like an Epic, this is in your menu as you go from edit to stitch out, and it's also on the bottom of your colour block list. For things like topazes where they don't have the big screen, if you use the fix button, that will do a based around your design. Fix for the sewing mode does a lock stitch, but in embroidery mode does a based around your design. So I'm going to actually do a based around the hoop on this instance. So there we go. And all I'm going to do is set it going. I'm just going to smooth it out with my fingers, and I am going to watch what I'm doing because I don't want to sew myself. Just make sure it's all flattened out. There we go. So that has now basted my fabric to my stabilizer so it can't move, and the stabilizer's firmly held in the hoop. It uses much less fabric because we're not having to put enough into the hoop here. So if I was using a big hoop and a small design, I could still use a small amount of fabric and baste around the design to a bigger piece of stabilizer. If you want, you can use a temporary adhesive spray, Odif 505, which is quite popular with quilters for basting quilts. You can use that. There are other ones on the market, but actually you probably don't need to, and I think this is less messy, particularly if you're using a tear away. You don't really want any gluey residue left on the back when you've taken that off. So yeah, that's how you baste and that's how you float. One thing I will cover with you while we're at this point is taking the sensor Q foot on and off. There is a really easy way of doing it, and you know, let's make everybody's life simpler. You can see the sensor Q foot is sprung, and this lever here sits on top of the needle screw, and while it's the needle's at the top and the foot is up and everything, that's under tension. Okay, it's firmly clamped against that needle screw there. So to take it on and off and make our life easier, I'm going to drop the needle down, and then there's no tension on this, and I can just come in with my screwdriver. Turn it the right way would help. Here we go. You see that's perfectly came off really easily. Then I can just lift the needle in order to take that out, and it's just the reverse for putting it on. So if I brought that in now, obviously I would have to try and push that lever back in order to get this straight on the shank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just hold that in place while I drop the needle. That's then made my life easy for lining that up with the shank, putting the screw in. I can't say this is the easiest way in the world to do this with a camera in front of me and between both hands. Yeah. Normally this is a doddle. There we go. Right. Okay, just that's another thing. Don't sort of tighten them up to within an inch of the life. You'll end up stripping the threads off the screw. Just finger tight and a little tweak is enough. So now I can lift the needle up. It puts that back under tension again, and that's made it much easier for us to actually get that foot on and off. Right, just going to move those clips out of the way. I think we've probably done with this one now. We'll take that out. Okay, so I mentioned before about these templates. These don't come with the hoops in the main. The standard templates, there's 3 sizes. So we have one for the 120 by 120, as we've already shown you. There's one for the 260 by 200. and there is one for the 260 by 360. Sorry, 200 by 360. Get it right, Louise. Let's just put that on top there. Move that out of the way. There we go. So you've got a good range of templates available. They're quite inexpensive if you think they will help. I mean, certainly for marking up your centres and everything and where you want things to go. I've even printed out from the free software a template onto translucent vellum. Paper crafters will know exactly what that is. I get mine from eBay or something similar. And you can actually stick your template to these. It will help get everything centered, and then obviously the template can also transfer to your machine so that you can use design positioning to get your design in exactly the right place. So they are useful. Probably most people don't even know about them, so that's why I thought I'd mention them today. So that's that. We've got several other sizes of hoop. We've obviously already used the 240 by 150, and we've got the 260 by 360, which only works on the Epic because it's that bit wider. But all those hoop up in exactly the same way. So we've all got the quick release on that works in the same way.